We'll start with you, Bob McIntyre.
Thank you, Senator. And in the few minutes I have here, I'd like to share some of the research that we've been doing on the various Republican tax proposals over the last several months. Now, for starters, as you pointed out, cutting taxes as part of a plan to balance the federal budget is very odd. Obviously, a big tax cut requires much bigger cuts in federal programs than would otherwise be necessary to eliminate the deficit. The Republican tax plan that is now pending is especially odious because most of its tax cuts go to the best off tenth of the population, and 2/3 of all families get nothing or actually pay higher taxes. So if you look at some of the economics of the plan, one thing that stands out for starters is how they've backloaded some of these tax cuts. In particular, they've got capital gains breaks that don't take effect until right after the 7-year budget window and then explode in cost. That's the indexing provisions. They've got backloaded in IRAs, which will cost more and more and more in the future years as they shelter more and more investment income. They even phased in their changes to the standard deduction for married couples so that most of the cost would be outside the window. So the upshot of that is that even if we were to reach a balanced budget by the year 2002, it wouldn't last very long if this tax plan became law. Of course, it's not even clear that this plan does balance the budget, the Republican plan, because even within their budget window, the cost of several of their tax provisions are significantly understated. One very notable example of that is the capital gains estimates from the Joint Tax Committee. They started off by saying it didn't cost anything to make it retroactive. They were apparently going to incentivize people in the past, which some have called the H.G. Wells theory of economic prognostication, that there had to be a time machine for people to go back and do something different in the past. But that $13 or $15 billion retroactivity item, they said, was free, basically. Even the prospective capital gains cuts, we think, are grossly underestimated. At the beginning of 1995, I happened to hire to work at Citizens for Tax Justice a man named John O'Hare, who for many years was the capital gains estimator for the Joint Tax Committee. And when he saw the estimates that came out of joint tax on the Republican plan, he was shocked. And he redid them using a more traditional type of methodology, and he found that the actual cost of these capital gains breaks isn't the 35 or 37 billion that the Joint Tax Committee is estimating, but more likely in the range of 112 plus billion over the 7 years, almost triple what the Republicans are putting out as their number. So that makes it that much harder to actually balance the budget as compared to doing it based on these, what we think are cooked up numbers. Now, you look at the details of the tax plan in terms of who wins and who loses. They will go on the TV shows and the radio and tell everybody they can this is a middle-class tax cut. But the fact is that the tax bill that the Republicans have approved would leave most families paying the same or more in federal taxes, while cutting taxes for only a minority. And for those who do get tax cuts, the wealthy benefit far, far more than middle-income families. We did an analysis, a micro-simulation, similar to what Joint Tax and Treasury could do but didn't. And we found that 64% of all families in this country would pay the same or more in federal taxes under the Republican plan. That includes 70 million families with no change because they don't have kids and they don't have capital gains, basically. And it includes 9.2 million families who would face tax increases, averaging about $260 each. That's mostly because of the cutbacks in the Earned Income Tax Credit. If you look at all families by income group, you find that the average tax cut for the best off 1%, that's families with incomes of $606,000 each on average, that their tax cut would be $10,500.
How much was it?
$606,000.
$606,000, not
right.
60.
That's even higher than congressional pay.
Yeah.
Their average tax cut would be $10,500. The average tax cut for families in the middle 20% of all families, counting those who don't get anything, which is most of them, would be $114. $114 is the Republican middle-class tax cut. $10,500 is the tax cut for those at the top. And of course, families in the bottom fifth would actually face a tax increase. The bottom line on it is that the best off 5% of all families in this country would get 44% of the tax cut. The bottom 80% would get only just over a quarter of the cut. Now, you have to understand one important point. I hope people understand this, and that's that the primary reason why this tax cut is so tilted towards the wealthy is the capital gains provisions. In fact, almost 3/4 of the tax cut that goes to the best off 1% comes from the capital gains cut. Now, it's nice to hear the president denouncing the Republican tax cuts as primarily benefiting the rich. He's right. But it's also important that he not get schnookered into endorsing some kind of capital gains cut of his own, because if he does, he has endorsed the Republican tax cut for the wealthy and violated the principle of fairness that he's said he's going to uphold. Now, another problem with the tax plan is that it's full of special interest tax breaks. You know, besides the capital gains cuts, you've also got repeal of half of the alternative minimum tax on big corporations, which will mean, inevitably, that some of these companies will stop paying taxes. And we'll go back to the bad old days of the early 80s when big companies like General Electric and General Dynamics and General Mills and lots of corporals and lieutenants out there in the business world, too, weren't paying any taxes at all, and middle and low-income families had to pay for them. They've got tax relief for multinational corporations, repealing reforms that were adopted in 1986 and 1993 that said that multinationals couldn't defer tax on their profits if they were sheltering them in havens and just building up investment accounts over there. They want to bring that back. They've got the IRAs exclusively for upper-income people with pension plans. They've got the medical savings accounts, which will also be tilted that way. And they've got pension changes in the pension area. I mean, first of all, they want to weaken the anti-discrimination rules to make it so that the protections for rank-and-file workers are less. And secondly, and they claim it's a revenue raiser, they want to allow corporations to raid their pension plans again, something the Congress stopped in recent years with reforms. They want to bring that back.